tried burning me. Then they tried burying me. This is my favorite. They even tried holy water. Give Daddy the glove back, Princess. Never! I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too. Every town has an Elm Street. I am forever.
Happy Father's Day.
Kids.
Good evening. Welcome to this week's edition of the WayBack Movies Podcast, a show where we review the best and not so best of 80s and 90s cinema, because really, fuck the 2000s. My name is Steve, and with me on this crazy journey,
Tessin.
Doctor.
And
we're back.
Nearing the end.
Yes, we're almost out of Elm Street. Yeah, we're getting there. We're technically, as of this, we are finished with the official original series.
Elm Street proper?
Kind of, though, because, again, there was another sequel in 2003. So, kind of done with the formal series, but not quite.
Because that counts, yeah?
That does count. That is an official sequel to this film. The next movie, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, is not a sequel.
Right.
It is its own thing, but it is part of the series, but it's not.
Hence the term new.
Yeah. So, technically, though, Freddy vs. Jason is the sequel to this film. Hence the start of it and everything like that. But yes, we are, of course, talking about Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Everybody's
favorite movie.
Everybody, at least one of us sitting in this room, it fucking is. Damn right it is. Yeah, as teased, this is my favorite film.
Hot take warning.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, and I'm certainly not a defender. I don't think I can defend this movie.
You're not going to sit here and argue that this is a great movie.
Oh, absolutely not. No. This is just a childhood favorite of mine. Yes, I had a bit of a fucked up childhood. This was a movie that, when it came out, I recorded it off of First Choice, which eventually became TMN. This is how old I am. And I watched this movie as much, if not more, than every other thing. Because, kids watch movies over and over again. This was one of mine.
Some had Aladdin, you had...
This is true. No. I had... Like my list would be, the 89 Batman movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare.
Well, those first two track.
Yeah.
But
the next one is a hard left. But...
When we're talking about a child.
Sure. Childhood films. Yeah. But this is a film that I can easily say I've seen well over 200 times. Because, again, as a kid, kind of mildly autistic myself, I also tended to watch movies a lot. Like, I would watch them more than once a day. So
like all the way through?
All the way through. So there's a, like I said, I mean, I'm definitely playing fast and loose with the number, but I would easily say 200 is not a,
Even if it's a ballpark, that's still high.
It's definitely high, but I mean, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility for me to have seen it that, probably more. Because, it's a movie I've never stopped watching. I've owned it on several different formats.
Name a format.
Right now, I own it on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray.
Right.
They never really released it on anything else.
But if they did,
I would fucking own it.
Even if you don't have the things that play those things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at this point, I don't have a VCR, but I still own 2 copies of the VHS. I own the box set that they put out in, I want to say, 2002. They put out a VHS box set. I have that, and I also have an original one from 1992.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then, of course, the DVD set from 1999 and the Blu-ray from 2011, I want to say, maybe 2010.
Yeah.
Around the time of the remake, because the font is the remake font, and it really pisses me off. But, yeah, so... Yeah, I fucking love this movie.
And you will count the ways.
I absolutely will. I will talk about how much I love every second of it, which is why I did that, because, this is my history with it. This is where it is. So in a weird way, okay, so when I recorded it, I was like 10, I believe. I think, because it came out in September. I would say that it hit pay-per-view around, not pay-per-view, cable would have hit probably around 92, so I would have been 10 years old. And yeah, I recorded it. Okay, so I watched half of it one night. I remember this very clearly. I watched half of it one night because that's what I did when I was a young kid. I would be up late watching TV until fucking ungodly hours. And I happened upon this, and I've been obsessed with Freddy Krueger since the 80s, but I'd never seen a full movie. So this was my chance to at least watch half of it. And I watched half of it, and I loved it. So I remember, like, you'd read the little listing in the book that they would send you every week and every month, and you'd be like, okay, that's when it comes on. So I remember it was coming on at, like, midnight one night. So our TV and VCR was in the basement. My room was on the main floor. So I literally went down and hit play and record as you would record a VHS. And I recorded it. And the whole night, I'm listening to, like, muffled sounds of it, and it was freaking me out. Because all I'm hearing is just these, like, horror movie sounds. And I'm like, oh, God, this is going to be creepy. Maybe this wasn't a smart idea, whatever, even though I'd seen a bunch of horror movies, and it didn't bother me. So I don't know why the hell I was freaked out about it, but I was. But then, the next day, of course, I got up early. Instead of watching cartoons that day, I literally sat and watched this, and it became my favorite movie for a long period of time. Answer?
You were awake while you were recording it. Why weren't you just watching it?
Because, so my dad had a habit of falling asleep in front of the TV. So he was in the basement sleeping on the couch.
Oh, okay.
So
while this was being
recorded, because I had to keep it very quiet. So actually, my VHS copy I watched was very shitty because the sound was so low that I would have to turn it up to ridiculous volumes, and all you would hear was the static sound of while I was listening to it. So I couldn't actually watch it at the time.
Okay.
I also think my parents probably were like, you might want to go to bed now, asshole. It's 12 o'clock at night. But, But if I could have, I absolutely would have sat and watched it. But I didn't get a chance to. So that's my my history of the first time I ever saw the movie. And, I've loved it ever since. And like I said, I've never stopped watching it. So with that being said, let's go back to 1991 for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Okay, so here we are. It is September 13th, 1991.
Freddy's second decade.
Freddy's entering the 90s.
And it showed.
I mean, it's true. This movie can only be made in 1991. Holy fuck.
Weird period.
Yeah.
The early 90s is just weird because it's not yet the 90s.
No.
Fucking before Nirvana hit or whatever, the grunge hit. But it's not the 80s?
No.
It's this weird middle ground.
Yeah. Like, in everything, not just...
No man's land.
Yeah,
type.
like, not just music, there was a thing called grunge, you know what I mean? Like, even the movies look grungy. And this is the epitome of
the
it.
dirty mid-90s.
Yes, very much.
This isn't that.
No. This is, like, a holdover from the 80s, so it has a lot of 80s sensibilities with, like, the outfits and shit like that, but it just looks dirty. And that's kind of the epitome of the early 90s.
Like a dirty
it's
80s.
Just dirty as fuck.
Dirty 80s.
Well, the 80s were slick and bright. This was like, we're coming down from that. It's like, we're coming down from the high, so everything's got to be dirty as fuck.
Everyone's getting off of coke.
Yeah, a little bit. So this is what it's like to come off of coke. So here we are. And that's what this movie looks like. This movie is the epitome of early 90s cinema, and it's fucking hilarious. It's very much a product of its time. But, so, like I said, September 13th, 1991. Story and directed by Rachel Taylor. Screenplay by Michael DeLuca. Producers, Michael DeLuca, Michael N. New, Robert Shea, and Aaron Warner. It's a lot of fucking producers. Produced and distributed by New Line Cinema. A box office of $34.9 million against a budget of $11 million.
Still made money,
but they were just like, wow, so we're fucked. Like, we can't seem to make successes anymore.
The keg is tapped.
Yeah, so it's like, well, maybe it was a good idea to end it. Sort of. Anyway, the cast. Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger, of course. Lisa Zane of the Acting Zanes. Billy Zane's big sister.
The amazing Acting Zanes.
Plays Maggie Burrows. Catherine Krueger.
Spoilers.
Shut up. Yaphet Kotto as Doc. Leslie Dean as Tracy. I still don't know how to pronounce that. Is it Dean or Deanne? I don't know. It's Deane. Dean. Sean Greenblatt as John Doe. Brecken Meyer as Spencer Lewis. Ricky Dean Logan as Carlos. Cassandra Rachel Friel as young Maggie. And Toby Sexton as teenage Freddy. Not much of a cast, really.
And we'll get to the cameos later.
Oh, yeah. I've left them out, but we'll talk. Don't worry. Most of them are in here. I left... we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So the productions of this film... after the critical failure of Nightmare 5, the producers figured the only way to make another success was to let the fans know that this was in fact the final one. Bullshit. Because almost...
at the time...
Nope. Almost from the beginning, they were lying.
Oh,
because
really?
Shortly after this film's release, they purchased the rights to the character of Jason Voorhees, with the intention of making Freddy vs. Jason, a film that had been talked about by both New Line and Paramount since 1987, which finally saw release in 2003.
It's a half-lie, because it's the intention of making it the final Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but not the final movie with a Freddy Krueger in it.
I don't know. I can't tell you. I mean, in a world where you're trying to make the final Nightmare...
Well, it's hard to do final slasher movies of anything.
It is. I mean,
right.
Friday the 13th ended its series twice.
Yeah.
So, I understand, well, 3 times technically if you count the remake as well. So, because, part 4 was the final chapter. How'd that go? And then
Then he goes to hell.
And then part 9, which was made by New Line Cinema, which is why it's called Jason Goes to Hell and not Friday the 13th, because they didn't buy the rights to Friday the 13th, they just bought Jason Voorhees. So they made Jason Goes to Hell the final Friday, which also had Freddy's glove show up at the end. Spoiler alert. So, nobody intended this to be the last one of anything. That's all it really is. So, they're full of shit, is what I'm getting at. A unknown director/writer named Peter Jackson was originally hired to write the screenplay for the film, calling it A Nightmare on Elm Street: The Dream Lover.
Jesus.
Him and his writing partner, Danny Mulheron, wrote a script which their idea saw Freddy aging and growing weak within the dream world. The teens of Springwood would have drug-fueled parties and enter the dream world to beat him up. He manages to kill one of the kids and gets his power back. Then there's a cop who ends up in a coma and is permanently in Freddy World, which is kind of an interesting idea, and especially the power thing.
Like Cool World?
Kind of, yeah. Well, no. Cool World, which, you know what, we'll get to that fucking movie.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get it. But he wasn't trapped in that world.
Yes, he was.
Was he?
Yep.
I've seen that movie 100 times, and I don't remember that at all. But I was very young, and I don't remember much of it.
He goes in the 40s, and he's trapped there for...
Was he trapped?
Yeah.
I don't remember him being trapped there.
No.
I really don't. But anyway.
Well, we'll get there.
We'll get there someday, for sure. I would still like to see that movie.
Like old Freddy and...
Yeah, because they ended up taking kind of that idea when Freddy vs. Jason came out.
I'd like to see that movie based on the fact that it's written by Peter Jackson.
Yeah, and this was during his Dead Alive, Meet the Feebles type of time period, so he's willing to do some fucked up shit. So I would have liked to see what he would have came up with.
Because The Frighteners didn't come out shortly after 91, yeah? It was 93, 94?
No, I think it was later than that. I think it was 96, 97, dude. This was literally, he had probably just left New Zealand by this point and had just finished making his 2 films. He was probably about to make, what's that, Heavenly Creatures?
Oh, right.
Yeah. But, so Rachel Taylor was expected to return as producer, but she lobbied Bob Shaye to let her direct. She leveraged the fact that he had just directed his first film called Book of Love. It would have been hard for him to say, I can be a first-time director, but you can't. Plus, he listened to her ideas, and he agreed, to which Robert and the crew were very happy, since she'd move up from being a production accountant on the first film. So she literally worked her way up. From the production accountant to director, so that's how you do that. Good for her. There was another script by Rachel Taylor and Michael I can never pronounce this, Almereda, in which a 16-year-old Jacob Johnson, yep, that one, the son that was born to Alice Johnson in the previous movie, was a major character. Alice, now in her 30s, was killed by Freddy.
The tracks.
Taryn Joey